Hi, welcome. Warm welcome to everyone. I'm so thrilled to have you with us for our fantastic, engaging seminar that we're going to be talking about today, Data Science Meets Life Sciences, AI Challenges and Opportunities in Biopharma, Synthetic Biology, and Beyond. I'm Claire Aldridge. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for FormBio, and I'm going to be your moderator today as we delve into this topic. For those of you who are unfamiliar with FormBio, we are a leading AI-powered drug discovery and development platform that combines data, technology, and expertise in silico solutions that reduce time to clinic while increasing the yield and the safety. We've got just a kind of a quick little thing here of some of the different things we're able to do for our customers. If you have any questions, please reach out after the seminar. After this panel discussion, or during this panel discussion, we'll be talking a lot about that interplay between data science, AI, and the life sciences industry. We're going to talk a lot about where we currently stand, and also how do we start to think about the future and how we can accelerate the process of getting science translated into the clinic where it can benefit people. We will do a Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to share your questions in the chat, and we'll address them during the Q&A. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists and let them introduce themselves. Amit, could you go ahead and do a quick intro?
Sure, Claire, and thank you so much for having me. I'm Amit Mathur, pretty much been a life sciences, biotech, advanced therapy, rare disease person throughout my life, and a mix of consulting. Primarily started my journey in business intelligence and then moved on to artificial intelligence in those areas. On the biotech side, I've been part of a bunch of early stage to commercialized companies that had multi-country businesses expanded. And right now I'm with Elevate Bio, which is a cell and gene therapeutic company which is advancing the CGT space aggressively for the last few years, where we are ramping up these advanced therapies, which are very complex and challenges. And one of the role I have is to ensure and see how technology can interface with biotech and advance in some of the critical areas at faster speed.
Fantastic. Arun?
Hey guys, I'm Arun. I'm a partner with the BCGX team. You might be familiar with the Boston Consulting Group as a premier business consulting group, but we also have an army of builders, data scientists, data architects, software developers, machine learning engineers, etc. And there's about 3,500 of them. And that's the BCGX team. I'm a partner there and also double down as the chief data scientist. Background, PhD in computational neuroscience, have a bunch of patents in deep learning, reinforcement learning, etc. And I've been doing machine learning, AI, deep learning since the days it was not super attractive to do, if I can say that. Like there was a time 20 years ago that people focus more on the software engineering side and less on the machine learning side. And that's the era that I probably come from.
And I think that's something we'll definitely talk about, is how technology has gotten to a place now where we can use it to solve different problems because it's advanced. George?
Hey, George Vasek. My PhD is in computational chemistry, actually, and my background long ago is computer-aided drug design. But for the past 15 years or so, I've been much more involved with sequencing and next-generation sequencing, applying technology to different algorithmic challenges, and that's been ongoing over those years. More and more, obviously, lately into the application of deep learning to those problems. But my role at NVIDIA, I lead strategic development in genomics and partner with top sequencing centers, cancer centers, pharma and biotech companies, and the instrument manufacturers themselves, really building our technology into their workflows for faster and more accurate analytic approaches. A little bit of background, maybe everybody knows NVIDIA, but just to say it out loud, we do a lot across all sorts of technology areas with recommender systems and security and robotics and autonomous vehicles. And graphics and visualization, of course. We have a really strong healthcare team focused on problems in medical imaging, drug discovery, smart hospitals, and so on. Again, my focus is more on the genomic side of things within that, but there's a lot of great stuff going on in the space. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks to all of you for joining us, and let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's start pretty high level, and I'll kind of call on you guys, and then we'll work through each of you so you can all give your responses. But what I'd like us to do is to really focus on the life sciences and how do we think about this from that life science perspective. To the extent that you can you tell us a little about the areas in applying AI that you're focusing on from an application perspective, from an investment perspective? And is there anything that you're staying away from? Amit, could you go ahead and kick us off?
Sure. For Elevate Bio requirements and for advanced biotech and advanced therapies, what we see is we are double downing on areas such as AI for drug discovery, molecular design, manufacturing intelligence. We go very focused, Claire, on when you look at two big verticals, which is manufacturing aspect, process improvement, what AI can do over there, because variability of the process is very high in the CGT and these advanced therapy space. And on the molecular design, drug discovery aspect, there are few areas that are emerging really, really strong for us, including structure prediction, which is where we would like to go. And AI definitely has a role to play. Some of the areas, if I can say, I would not say staying away, but you can say that data and infrastructure type of activities are happening, but we are not advancing on AI side, would be quality, EBR, those type of areas where they really require the infrastructure and data foundational elements. But to invest further on AI, there is discussions which is going on.
That's amazing. George?
Yeah, so I'm much more in what Amit said on the molecular design side of things, or the developments there on the research side of things. Really, we've been focusing across genomics, all stages of the data understanding and analysis, from in the instruments themselves, for faster and more accurate data generation on the raw data side of things, bringing the cost down for the generation of the data. That obviously makes it available to a lot more applications. Then once the data is generated, just how to extract the most relevant genetic information out of it as quickly as possible. And then ultimately, as you look in more the research space, let's say, to looking at large cohorts to understand what those variational differences mean, and how to tie that back to either phenotypic traits or some predisposition toward disease. So fundamentally hitting the various aspects of genomics within the realm of precision medicine, trying to drive better outcomes.
And I think that's so important, and something we'll obviously talk a lot more about is, having an understanding of what the string of A's, T's, C's, and G's is the first step. But without being able to get those insights out, it's still just a string of A's, T's, C's, and G's, right? And so that's where this analysis, and I know Form uses NVIDIA to really accelerate our ability to get those insights out. Arun?
Within the business consulting construct, again, the questions that come to us are typically they start with the business first angle, but even then I would try to bucket most of the questions into the buckets that Amit was describing earlier at the molecular biological level, may that be disease modeling or drug discovery, and there's a good amount of work there. And also at the patient level, may that be real world data analytics, epidemiology, patient outcomes. That's a very hot space. And also work in the pharma industry across, may that be pricing or a whole bunch of consumer facing work that happens within the pharma space.
So I'd love to just kind of get your thoughts as you guys were all speaking. It's interesting, you're looking at that drug discovery space, real world evidence. What is the kind of the split between an AI application versus a machine learning kind of application? And is that AI generative AI, or is it, more of a, kind of a traditional AI? I would just love your thoughts on that. And I'm going to just pick on different people. George, do you want to take that first?
I guess I would say all of the above. It's you want to use the right tool for the right job, and so different approaches lend themselves better to different problems. And certainly if a traditional heuristic numerical algorithm works, then of course apply it. But I think what we've seen over time is the let's say evolution, if you will, that went from early expert systems, automated systems, to early machine learning that was supervised but able to obviously learn a lot of things relevant to whatever space, to more and more the deep neural networks that are able to learn things unsupervised. I think what you're started referring to maybe in your question, Claire, is even the latest generation of like large language models and so on, these foundational models that can often extend their what would I say, that their results or their search beyond what they've even formally been trained on. With a sort of dearth of information, they're able to extrapolate from context. And so there's been a lot of exciting changes, but yeah, to each of them, apply to certain things and not necessarily to everything. So,
and that's, I've been in this space for longer than I care to think about. And that's, really one of the things I think we're seeing is that now the advances have gotten to a point where we can actually apply them to some of these complex biological systems, which we couldn't necessarily do before. Arun, I'd love your thoughts on that.
I agree with everything that George said earlier. I don't want to sound redundant.
Amit, anything to add?
One thing, and George, you covered it pretty well. So it gives a strategic perspective. One additional point of view that I see is clear that we always are limited on investments and resources, right? As an industry, as an organization. And it is one area is that you want to be ambitious to do it all and, really walk fast on generative AI and tech AI and traditional AI. The way we are segregating and thinking, and one example that comes to me is manufacturing side, which is a little more interpretable. If you have, say, 3 steps to do it, which is foundational, I call it connected and intelligence. You want to get the foundational pieces right in the organization across board, and then move. And by connected, I mean, machines talking to software's talking to, flowing in data well, getting it to the data lakehouse, and then eventually to AI lakehouse. That type of ecosystem you have to work towards by default, either or. But when it comes to reinforcement learning type of aspects, the deep learning aspects, I feel, which is the intelligence layer, I just go back to what George is saying, that you want to be a little more mindful out of 10 things, doing the 2 things that are right and putting your resources over there, while these foundational steps you want to build across a platform for the company.
Yeah, when you put the, sorry, just to kind of double down on what Amit you said, right? I mean, identifying the specific use cases and like estimating the ROI, right? Because there is the foundational research, that's one thing. And then like figuring out how do you prioritize the use cases, may that be like speed to value versus like just the amount of data you have or what you have. But that question gets pivoted differently when you put in like Gen AI completely, right? Because if you're considering just like what I would call as traditional AI, which includes deep learning, reinforcement learning, etc., right? That level of, let's say, optimization criteria or like how you tie it to the business, that's like much clearer. Whereas Gen AI, I mean, we get what, I mean, of course, it's an evolving space. There is not like an intrinsic cost function embedded to kind of like directly embed in a business application, if you will.
Yeah, you kind of get what you get. Well, so that, AI is such a hot topic right now, and everybody is talking about AI. And I know we're having to do a lot of education around what is real AI and kind of what is, hype, for lack of a better word. And within the life sciences, what do you see as discrete problems, the kind of problems that AI is well suited to solve? So what do you think we're going to continue to see advances? What has staying power in this space? And again, going to take turns picking on people. Arun, it's your turn.
I would say, I mean, we are going to go back into the availability of data and like the specific problems, right? That's what we kind of pivot towards. Within the drug discovery space, amount of, the sophistication we've reached on the chemistry side, we have to kind of push it towards the biopharma side as well. May that be like gene therapy and others. But there, it is not just AI, in my mind at least. Bear in mind, like maybe I'm a little bit of an anomaly here, because you get what you get from AI, but you still need to validate it by like testing, and like what happens in like real biology is different. And like, yes, we get all our probabilistic models working, but like live testing and getting the gratification or like validating it means that you're talking about like longer loops. This is specific to like this particular domain, right? This probably, it's not tied to, for example, if I'm going to predict like whether you're going to buy a cappuccino or a latte, I don't have to worry about this because I can estimate a probability and we are good.
But for, biological systems, by definition, are incredibly complicated. And, one of the things that your comments, really leads me to make a point about is, none of these tools are going to replace the judgment, right, of a scientist or somebody like that. I think that's an incredibly important thing, that these are just tools to allow our scientists to apply their judgment to a smaller set of information that's been kind of pre-screened. George, your thoughts?
Just building on that last comment you said, there's, I guess if you worry about the naysayers that think, AI is going to take over everything, or I don't know if that's a naysayer or a yaysayer, depends on, how they hype it. But, people are concerned, losing their job to AI, let's say. And I think in any, scientific setting or advanced setting, it probably is less important. But I think the most important thing to realize is, it's not that someone will lose their job to an AI. They might lose their job to someone who knows how to apply AI. Right. And dissecting out and learning, from the experiences. And certainly the other experts on this panel have good insight there. But, that's what all of us can do, is take out of it, is figure out how best to apply it in our particular situation. So
I love the story I read about, when Big Blue first beat, I think it was Kasparov, and then, just started regularly beating, the best chess players in the world. And then when they paired that computational power with the creativity of a human brain, you really got something special, right? And that's what I think that this is. We're at a point where we can do that. We can pair the creativity of a scientist with this computational power, and are going to be able to design things and come up with solutions that we've never even imagined before. Amit, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Absolutely. I mean, and I totally agree with you. AI plus human is much better than, AI alone or human alone. I mean, just building to what Arun and George mentioned, I'll take an example. This was a real life case, and we had to decide the implication of AI on, process maturity, where an AI can, let's say, augment a scientist, what they are doing their job, better at it, get the 100 steps in the process so well so that it can help. And the other approach was AI taking, or machines taking, totally a different path that scientists don't have the time, opportunity, resources, or bandwidth. One such case was, and probably George, you might be closer to these things, metagenomic analysis that we were doing on the gene business. And scientists just didn't have time. They were working on other steps. And I thought that they will love the model where we are proposing to speed up the steps. But instead, they said, no, why don't we do this, and this was a real life case where we agreed mutually with our R&D community and us that why not we implement AI data science type of efforts towards a particular solution, a path C, that we together do not have the bandwidth to do it. The outcome was clear there. They wanted to clearly see the benefits of AI. You call it Gen AI, traditional AI. They said, we don't want to merge it. I don't think that is the exact approach we would have taken all the time or in other groups, but specifically for scientists that worked. Versus on the manufacturing community, it's always the process optimization and the efficiency that you get out of it as the ROI benefit, which goes a little more traditional the way we think.
Well, and I think that brings up a point. Scientists by nature are skeptical. We don't want to make any conclusions until we see the data and until it's been repeated, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you guys think about communicating that benefit in a way that helps overcome that hurdle of skepticism? And anybody who, I will call on somebody, but if someone thinks they have an answer.
I don't know if it is tied to specifically just scientific skepticism. The way, at least I think about this, is like the algorithm provides what it is providing. Okay. And like, in order to realize the value, you have to think about like, how do you enable the end users, right? If it is just drug discovery, that's an easy problem. Whereas if it comes to like anything in patient analytics or other areas, I mean, there is like, it is not just immediately reaching the patient. There is like different areas in which like how we you get buy-in from like different levels of the organization. Like, I mean, they need to sign off as well. And they are not signing. If there is a hesitancy in them signing off, it's not because they don't trust the AI. It's more about like confirmation bias. They've been doing things in a particular way. And that's where I think about more like enablement piece, in the sense that algorithm provides something. And like, how do you ensure that you are able to tell your folks that like, this is how you need to use the algorithm to see the benefit of the algorithm, right? And this might be a little provocative, but like, bear in mind with BCGX, we've been doing this for like, I've been around for close to 8 years. Like thousands of projects. And one of the key learnings for us has been like what we call as the 10-20-70. 10% is the algorithm, 20% is the engineering, 70% is the enablement and the change management to make sure that this actually reaches the end of day, right? Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of POCs, a lot of studies, and then like what is it, which one is actually going to see the light of day? That's the exam question, right? Because everybody agrees on the merit of doing something. Right. Everybody agrees that this is a good thing to do, but we don't really see much bubble up to be like widely adopted.
Right. And I think, and that's been an issue for, I mean, over 20 years that I've thought about this. And you know, when you think about that, especially in that final place you were talking about, kind of that real world evidence, you have so many different customers, right? You've got the patient, you've got the payer, you've got the clinician, you've got the hospital system, and trying to get them all to buy in to whatever it is. They might have different incentives, and you know, they're maybe not always aligned. I think that's problematic. Amit or George, do you have anything to add?
George, well, I'll go first, probably. I was just loving what Arun, you said, 10-20-70. And, you know, one thing that I see in addition to that is, Claire, when you go with these meetings, and you know, and a start of an AI project, you are making a decision before the project starts, because as a tech practitioner, you know that it may not give the result immediately. You do not want to over communicate. You want to have the, you know, cultural alignment with the business or R&D groups and tech groups early on. And during those conversations, one thing comes out for us is, if we have a total 100% commitment on a particular area, we go on it. But as a team, if we have any type of hesitance, we don't start in general, right? Even if we feel that ROI benefits have been communicated, but hey, it's going a little more theoretical than what we could see here at Elevate Bio, based on the data that we have, based on the tools infrastructure we have. So number of times I've seen the cultural alignment or, you know, piece takes precedence over anything else, because you don't want to get into the friction piece later on. And it's important for, I guess, for tech practitioners, you know, to communicate that early on, because the results and outcomes of AI projects can either take time, or it may not come to the level immediately.
Yeah, George.
Well, I think Arun was the one who started off saying it's sort of easy in science because it's more rational, and you know, with the business outcomes, it's more challenging. But I often think that the scientists are some of the hardest ones to prove and convince. You know, we all fall into, you know, we do what we're used to doing and our habits, and we've done it this way a long time. And if a new approach comes, it might look good, but you know, we can always, you know, come up with excuses not to adopt it. So scientists often are like, well, yeah, that's a nice story, the presentation, but I'll wait till I see the publication. And then the publication comes out and they go, yeah, but it needs to be validated by, you know, additional papers. And then a few more papers come out, and finally people start to adopt it. So I think change can be hard anywhere. So
well, and I think in science, one of the things I think about in science a lot is, you know, by definition, scientists are at the cutting edge from an experimental perspective, and they're very comfortable with the disruption there. But they will sometimes not be as open to those technological advances, right? They're much more open to say, let's use a new protocol, or let's use a new, right, like gene editing enzyme. But you know, they just sometimes can be a little more resistant to technological solutions. And same with clinicians. I think those are both kind of people that are used to being at that forefront of innovation, but in a different type of way.
Yeah.
This question is specifically for you, Amit. Elevate is a CDMO. So you manufacture new therapies, very complex therapies, cell and gene therapies. And so I would love to have your thoughts on what you're seeing in terms of AI's potential to aid not just in manufacturing, but in manufacturability of these kind of complex molecules, because that is so different than what we've seen in small molecule development, right? We know that, you know, a synthetic pathway, maybe you want to get it down to 12 steps instead of 17, but for cell and gene therapies, these are living systems, and our ability to control what comes out the other end is much, much less.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're spot on, Claire, and you know, you see small molecules, and as you move towards, say, for example, rare disease, advanced therapies, cell and gene environment, it becomes complex also. I feel because of two big reasons, and you know, that is where we see a lot of discussions at our end. One is the variability of the process. It is so huge compared to, it could be because it's an early stage advanced science, it is building up, and it sometimes becomes tough for us to capture the variability of the process in a way that, you know, you can do it repeatable again and again, and so that you can apply a machine intelligence or AI or, you know, what have you. The other aspect is the data. There is not humongous data in every space. Data is evolving and building, but it is not to the level what you would see in, say, for example, you know, autonomous vehicle type of areas where things are coming up at an exponential pace. Here, things I see data evolvement happening as of now. And the last piece is, you know, it just goes back to the previous point we were discussing. Even in manufacturability, you see the compliance side so strong that as you look at the GXP compliance type of areas, you don't want to touch those areas with too much of AI, because your partnership with the quality or QA type of world is so strong that you are kind of like going with the set tools and designs and infrastructure that is in place, and you don't want to touch the GXP compliance area. However, there is more chances, I feel, of disruption in the R&D, early drug discovery, clinical side, much more where the scientists are ready to explore as the GXP compliances regulations are. You have you can do innovation and disruption much more easily.
Well, and I think that's a very good point about the GXP portion of this, because you've also got that other customer of your regulatory agencies and things like that as well, which...
Yeah, I mean, you know, to cue back, what I feel as a tech practitioners, I'm a big believer in Gen AI, traditional AI, and sometimes you can view this world as a decision making can happen at AI space, but then it has to be implemented back into the real life data where the GXP compliance bucket is. Right now, sometimes the challenges are to convince that side of the world that you can let the AI make a decision and then implement it on real data here and get going with the GXP compliance bucket.
Absolutely. All right, this next question, Arun, I'm going to ask you to tackle it first, but would love to hear from everybody. You know, all of you are super important and influential in what is your organization's philosophy and you know, focus on AI. But what have you learned specifically with your consulting role? You get to see a lot of breadth that a lot of people don't get to see. So would love to know your thoughts on what you're seeing kind of across customers and across clients that you're working with.
It's the abundance of POCs which never see light of day, and like not having a philosophy on like which one should see light of day. And that is compounded by issues around like code quality, and like in the sense that like some POC, somebody did it, but then the effort involved in taking it to for another drug or another patient population or whatever, none of it is like is plug and play. And those kind of I mean, we have to think through these kind of things a priori, right? In the sense that like, how do you leverage, how do you prioritize, and where are you going to invest? Again, this kind of goes back to the point that Amit was mentioning earlier. That for me is one of the key learnings, and the panacea or the remedy is like high top level buy-in. right? Because one thing that I try to do across all my projects and efforts is like when we work with a client team, we are working together in a room and we have like different mandates, right? There is a data engineer, there is a machine learning engineer, there's a software developer, and we are all working on, let's say, some kind of a data science application or a model. And we try to devolve into a common currency. May that be like 1% of model improvement, a model that is deployed over like every 3 days or every day, or like if it is like consumer acquisition, then we have set target. And having everybody to forcing everybody to hold hands on the common currency means that you're actually like pushing the team to drive value, as opposed to like one person saying, oh, the other person's code is not okay, or like the data, like there is always going to be like data issues. There is no such thing as a clean data.
Never enough data.
Yeah, and I also completely push back with some of my clients when they say, well, look, I'm going to first create a data environment which is going to be amenable for everything that all the analytics I want to do. I'm like, that is a road to nowhere. I mean, we can all spend like years together building the ideal data environment, but that doesn't mean that it's going to immediately provide value. And the message there is like, or at least the lesson learned there is to start small, think big, but start small, and it's okay to fail. Okay, it's okay to fail in the sense that you start with a particular data and you have a specific POC and you fail. It's okay. You fail, learn fast, and you keep going. You still have the bigger picture. And this level of bigger picture management needs to come in from the top level, in the sense that this cannot be just stuck at like how do I say it, like an IT manager or like interim manager. It needs to go all the way to the top, and like, because that's a level of decorum that we would need to force.
Right. Well, and that's what I think of that, again, I'm kind of straight out of biotech and learning a lot about AI over the last couple of years, that, when I think about those things, at finding what is that POC, how do we test this? To me, that's a little like what we do in drug development, where we say, what's the indication, right? That's got the greatest likelihood of success, the greatest likelihood for a signal, the greatest likelihood to give us a biomarker and give us some idea that this is working the way we want it to. And that's what I think when we're doing these POC experiments, how do we make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success, right? Like doing something that makes sense in a very discrete way. All right, so George, just wanted to check in with you. Obviously, NVIDIA is playing an enormous role in enabling cost-effective AI. I know we use you, and it's enabled us to do things much more quickly, much more cheaply, and we really appreciate that. Thank you very much. But specifically in the realm of genomics, what are the trends that are kind of you see coming together around AI, data, genomics? How are they intersecting?
How much time do I have? I could probably talk for an hour session for that.
We'll set up a follow-up webinar. Just do it.
No, there's certainly a lot going on. I think maybe I'll touch on a couple different points if you give you a moment to build it out. So the first, I think, is in the instrumentation itself. There's a big drive bringing AI to the edge, right? And this is happening everywhere: autonomous vehicles and robotic surgery and all of that. But in our space, it's going into medical devices and scientific instruments, right? And the cool thing that this allows is it really turns the instrument from hardware into a software-defined instrument, all right? And this actually kind of lends back to some of the previous answers where, how do you get people to adopt something? Well, you implement it in software in the instrument, and then you can improve the instrument without changing the hardware, all right? So as new deep learning models come along, or you get better at it, or a better framework comes, you can bring that into the instrument. And so this has been like an ongoing thing, say with Oxford Nanopore, where we work with them on their base callers within the instrument to get more and more accurate over time, and how to turn that sensor signal into the ACTG. So all of that's driving accuracy in the instrument. It's bringing down, or it's improving speed that the instrument runs at. Accuracy means you can often sequence with lower coverage. So both of those are driving down the cost it does to sequence something. And so, as we've seen the trends going over years, it's getting less and less per sample to sequence. So more and more people are doing it. more and more numbers of samples. This is leading to larger and larger cohorts of data that need to be analyzed. And this maybe lends to kind of what you were talking about then. How do we speed up and improve the analysis coming off the instrument? That's something we work on a lot. With our Parabricks software suite is one tool that I know you guys are familiar with, in particular, Colossal Biosciences recently. Who you're very fond of. And so for anybody who hasn't heard of them yet, they're focused on de-extincting the woolly mammoth amongst other extinct species. And they also care very much about endangered species and research toward that. But they showed that their analysis pipelines, using the NVIDIA technology, were 12 times faster end to end and at a quarter of the cost per sample. And now, why is that important? Well, everybody loves faster and cheaper, but let me give 2 quick examples of why it matters. So on turnaround time, in critically ill patients, the time to getting an answer is phenomenal. It affects whether you even have time to implement a therapy, right? And so, for instance, we worked with Stanford and a number of other organizations on critically ill patients in neonatal care. And there, the standard of care is 6 to 8 weeks to get an answer back. Well, obviously that exceeds the life of the patient sometimes. And so we did literally the Guinness Book of World Records fastest turnaround for identification of disease-causing variants in critically ill patients, and got it down to just over 7 hours. Okay, so, and that's everything from enrolling the patient to the clinical report, and it involved, somebody strapping on their sneakers and running the blood sample down the hall, so shave every minute you can. But, our software was part of that. And then you can get to the point where you can intervene in an effective time manner and have a better outcome. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end is
actually stop damage from happening.
Right. The other end is thinking now you're generating many, many more samples. You talked about you can't have discoveries unless you have good, well-annotated data and so on. So scaling up to be able to do these biobank scale projects. So we work with many national programs, but UK Biobank would be a good example of that. The 500,000 patient samples that they have, whole exome data, whole genome data, all of that's been analyzed with Parabricks, in part because it's the only tool that can get you through that many samples in a reasonable window. And so that's the tool Regeneron used for generating all of that data. So I think it's important, on both scales. And I hope I answered your question about how all of these are kind of coming in from different directions and uniting together in the real answer on things. So.
Well, and I think that's what we're all really excited about, right? Is we're finally able to get the information and insight from that information in a meaningful time to act, right? And to have an impact on patients, which is, I think, one of the things that drives all of us. All right, so this question I'm going to pick on Amit and Arun. We talked a little bit about kind of overcoming skepticism with scientists, but I do want to get your thoughts on kind of the cultural friction that sometimes happens when, biologists might be a little resistant to AI or data science. And so I would just love to know any strategies that you've used to overcome that friction, of these biologists who might not be as amenable to these tools.
Sure. I'll go first, Arun. Claire, my perspective there is that when you look at our scientists and biologists community, you find, really broadly, I've seen 2 categories of people. One is you think about the bioinformatician side who are doing even next-gen sequencing and that type of area. These guys are they know data science really, really well. They have a lot of belief. They know it to the advanced level. There is less of conviction, less of convincing them. And it is a quick ramp up there. And you can get a real outcomes sooner because they are very well versed with the space and they are with you right from day one. They in their meetings, you will go and digital AI, traditional AI, Gen AI, all that stuff will be there, right, sitting as one of the things, action items they want to do. Then you have the second side of scientific community, which is not so much of a believer.
Right. You're hardcore bench scientist.
Yeah. The core bench scientists, they are now, in this decade more tuned to the traditional tools. Maybe 15, 20 years back, they hated that as well. So convincing that aspect was a huge pain. But what I saw, what worked 20 years back, 10 years back, it's the same theory that is working today. In all our cross-functional governance meetings, we are sitting together and making a decision for us, which means on the tech side, I go back to those IT citizenship type of model where they have to do the 80% of work, and we give them the beautiful environment and take up the cross-functional aspects which are tricky. And if they cannot, the conviction is less, we drop that project. Versus, some of the other areas which requires tech to take a leadership in convincing and argument or making a analogy based argument and getting them a little, maybe warm up is the right word, and see the benefits of some of these AI tools technologies. And the third thing, which was a very practical observation, they compete within each other. So if you have like 8 to 10 scientific groups and
Yeah.
two are doing really good, that's a
Mhm.
good thing that you will get out of it, because in the
Right.
cross-functional governance, they see one group taking solid advantage of AI and these things, and others feel they are lagging behind and they won't go there.
And they're seeing acceleration of their colleagues' work. And absolutely. Arun, anything to add?
I mean, bridging the gap, as you describe it, is much more pronounced. I completely agree. And I agree with everything that Amit mentioned. And as much as we force people to sit in the room and kind of have like a common currency and stuff that I mentioned earlier, it also boils down to like innate human ability to kind of agree to disagree, or like ask questions to kind of like not have this us versus them attitude, and actually like think that, okay, we are all playing for the same team. You're a scientist, you understand like the manufacturing chemistry, whereas I'm a data scientist, or you're a biologist working, or I'm an AI engineer. And like having that awareness of the home room that we come in from, and like having an open mind to actually like sit and learn. I think that's pretty much, I call it as a soft skill, but that's pretty much what typically helps in bridging the gap.
Yeah.
I like to use is like respectful disagreement. Go ahead,
Yeah.
George.
Oh, I was just going to refer back, Arun, that kind of ties in a comment that you made earlier too about doing POCs and having permission to fail. Amit, you pointed out a successful project, everybody's going to look at that and follow it. But I think you can also learn a lot when you fail. And don't do it if you can avoid it. But when you do fail, let everybody know. And it's like, then people won't do that one. And if that's another good way for organizational learning to happen, I guess, if there's some transparency around that. And again, permission to do it without getting, too much, blame or pain that comes out of it, right?
Well, I think another one of the phrases I like to use is fail early and often, right? Like,
Right.
but making sure that when you do fail, you learned something out of it, right? That can inform either your next move or somebody else's next move. And how important that is, like you say, that transparency, that willingness to be able to talk about your failure in a way that makes it a positive. I mean, maybe failure has too negative of a connotation. Is there another word we could come up with besides failure?
Learnings.
Opportunities to learn. That's right.
Opportunities to learn. Let's rebrand failure. That's what we'll come out of this with. So, let's see, George, I'm going to ask you to take the lead on this one. How do you see decision-making happening to implement these kind of projects? And what are some of the frameworks that you see with your relationship, with NVIDIA seeing into a number of organizations? What kind of framework do they use in biotech, advanced therapy companies?
That's an interesting question, Claire. So I guess where my mind jumped to right when you asked it is one of the ways we wind up having learnings. So NVIDIA works in, again, many, many domains, but we can learn from one domain and bring it into biotech. An example that came to me as you were asking the question was just a case, again, I'll refer back to Oxford Nanopore. They have a nanopore processor in their instrument. A signal comes off of that, and they have to turn it into A, C, T's, and G's. Well, it was actually our group working on voice recognition. They used a model called QuartzNet, and that turns a sound signal into the human alphabet or English alphabet. And yeah, bright scientists looked at that and said, that looks a lot like that sensor signal. And it, sure enough, taking that model over, let you work. So I think there's a lot of creative synergy that can happen that can help these things. Again, it goes back to what we've talked about previously about communication and letting cross-functional teams know what worked over here and connecting the dots to how it can work over there.
Well, and how many times have we seen an advance because of exactly that, right? Somebody learned about something in a different industry and brought it to their industry and saw that similarity. Amit, do you have anything to add?
Yes, a couple of things in addition to what George just mentioned. It's pretty interesting that you look at the, two aspects very carefully in the sense business value and tech feasibility. And by business value, I mean some things are ROI benefit capturing is easier, which means efficiency gains and stuff. But few areas, have high potential, like structure prediction, those type of areas. And you have a lot of belief, and then you want to go back and see your external, internal resources and tech feasibility where they are. So that is one model that works for us for the big ticket items, where you can clearly come to an alignment on what's like a marginal win, what's like a likely win, what's a high risk type of area, and make a consensus decision together. The other side, which I feel really works well for the fail fast AI implementation, is run POCs that you believe in. They are not too resource intensive or budget intensive. But if you have a belief and the POC works well, and even if it is failing, you are failing fast, you are learning, you reach an optimum stage where you can then implement it across organization for the areas, because something, there is a glimmer of light over there and you can build it further.
Arun?
I think guess it was very cleverly articulated by Amit. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, fantastic. Just a quick reminder to our audience, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll be going to a Q&A here in a couple of minutes. One of the things, and I think I'm going to ask Arun to take the lead on this, but then obviously want everyone's thoughts. But again, as a consultant, you see some breadth that is incredibly valuable. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but just really that senior level buy-in, and how do you get that C-suite to understand the value of bringing in these kind of tools to accelerate their business, and setting that culture, because I think we all know culture starts at the top, but setting that culture to be open to these kind of ideas.
I mean, it's not just tools or techniques, right? Because if you are a CEO or a CTO, I mean, these tools and techniques exist everywhere. Like, how do or why should I invest in this within my organization? And at the end of the day, if I'm reporting to my shareholders or my steerco or like whichever committee that me as a CEO report to, like at the end of the day, it always boils down to some kind of a revenue impact or business impact or value that I'm trying to show, right? And that's the reason I always, I mean, maybe it's just like a consultant view, or like maybe some people might see it as a cynical view, but tying it to the business value always makes sense in terms of like getting buy-in from the top of the C-suite. Because once they see the value, and then, or they are committed to, like, if not just like dollar impact, it could be just other types of value that we want to realize, right? And how it percolates down has been like the methodology that, at least based on my experience, always seem to works consistently.
All right, anything to add?
Maybe, Amit, do you want to go, or should I go first?
Please go ahead. I'll jump
Well,
in.
I was going to say, so I actually agree well with everything Arun said about like C-suite adoption, and that opening the doors to bringing it into the organization and it coming down. I think it's actually important also for any organization to have complete bottom up as well, because everyone in the organization right now has opportunities to bring technology in for their particular role, and like, I don't know, raise your hand if you've already played with ChatGPT a little bit, but it should, if you haven't, go do it today. It's super easy, but you can start using it to draft emails, or what I use it for, I go through publications and have it summarize it for me, and I can kind of quickly skim them and decide which ones I need to spend more time on. And so there's always places where that you can adopt some of this. Now, that said, don't drop your corporate IP into ChatGPT. That's not a good way forward, but there are places that you can adopt it. And then, if your role is, more structure-based drug design or bigger biological problems, obviously the language models you should be using aren't ChatGPT, but there are tools out there like NVIDIA's BioNeMo framework for applying large language models to the language of biology and chemistry. And so I think everyone, in that space can go and try those things, but you should be trying them today, maybe failing, but do your POCs and get moving quickly.
Learning,
and then,
we're rebranding.
That's right. Opportunities for learning. And, so then that starts driving some of those successes, because, those are the people, everybody can see what best fits their work and their role.
Yeah.
And a CEO can't dictate to you what's going to work.
Advocates, right? Like those are the kind of people who are on that front line. All right, we've got a couple of questions coming in. What emerging technologies or trends do you believe will have the most significant impact on the future of data science and life sciences? And how should aspiring data scientists start thinking about this and preparing for those kind of changes?
I can take that one.
Yeah.
I see that in Elevate Bio, where we have clearly these two segregations on the manufacturing side and the scientists on the drug discovery side. There is tremendous amount of work that happens because we are always, there is a lot to do, less resources. That type of environment is always there. A lot of stuff we see happening on the, when you look at the manufacturing, hardware equipment, that area, lab automation, robotics over there, robotic lab automation, IoTs building in, digital twins and virtual simulations, those models working for the manufacturing side is working well. I feel we should be getting there in future, but I see a lot of hope on quantum computing on the drug discovery side, and it can power through a lot, especially for Elevate Bio and also other early stage biotechs that are advancing forward, because there is this element of speed efficiency that tech can do in those areas really well and power through some of the results. If the scientists build it early on, get their hands. I mean, it's in a way, the implementation theory is very similar to what we used to see maybe 20 years back when the world was moving from mainframe to, you call it cloud and other things. There was initial resistance. People felt nervous. Then tech practitioners started sitting with them, kind of getting them exposed to it and get it early on, fail fast, do the whole thing and get it going, because you want to take advantage of the same thing. And I see the same thing happening in generative AI side, where you can be the early adopter user through POCs and other things and get going.
Great. George, Arun, do you have something to add?
Go ahead, George.
Well, I was going to say Amit nailed that one pretty well. And I did kind of talk to it a little bit before, but maybe what I will say is, as with everything in this space, whatever tools we're using now, 10 years from now, there'll be different ones. If you look back, what was 10 years ago like in deep learning? It was, separating cat images on the internet, right? Think how far we've come since then, right? You're riding in vehicles that are, completely automated based on these technologies. And so, and ChatGPT now is new, and it seems, or rather, large language models seem fairly exciting and new. But 10 years from now, we'll look back on this and say, wow, look at everything that's come since then. So I wouldn't say get too caught up in any one of these, but have the basics, work on the basic skills, keep your eyes open, and when something new comes, do be ready to move to it. And again, go back and get those opportunities for learning with lots of POCs on these new technologies as they come, and that will lend you into being part of that next wave, whatever that wave will be.
And there will be many waves, just to kind of.
There will be many waves.
Anyway,
absolutely.
What I think the most important skill for an aspiring data scientist might be, and really anybody young starting in their career, right, is curiosity. Always staying open to what's new, how can I learn about it, what are some interesting ways that I might want to apply it. Next question from the audience: what diseases and advances do you think will be resolved in the future with the help of AI? I certainly have some thoughts, but
maybe you
I'm
should
just the
start.
what I'm thinking about is a lot of, and Arun mentioned this a little bit, that real world evidence. How can we start to use the data that we have out there to understand the signal, the signature of a disease process starting when it is still reversible? There are things happening that we can see on a molecular level long before there are symptoms. So how can we start to get that kind of information when we can still either halt progression of a disease before there's too much damage, or potentially while it's still able to be reversed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to that, Claire, I see there is in all these areas, pharmacovigilance and drug safety as an area that AI can have tremendous benefit. I mean, there is tons and tons of things that we can see in future, and early on, you come to know about the whole equation around drug safety, and that can have a fundamental role to play.
Well, and which patients would most likely benefit from a drug as well. And I think we're going to start having tougher and tougher questions about where we spend our healthcare dollars, and how do we make sure when we spend our healthcare dollars, it's for a drug that has the potential to help this patient.
Yeah, absolutely.
George, Arun, anything to add?
Where rubber meets the road. Sorry, go ahead, George.
No, you finish that thought, Arun.
It's like we to think about AI as some kind of a standalone in the last 57 minutes, right? The way I think about it is like how the new world is going to look like is going to be in conjunction with some of the deep tech, like synthetic biology or like manufacturing work. That there is a level of not just data and like how data is going to be generated as well. And I only say this because I also go to conferences where it's less AI and more like deep tech. I mean, it's much more a profound topic in Europe, less so in North America. And you will see like so many, like even in like business plan competitions for deep tech money, like there is people talking about like, oh, this is like for renal failure. And again, bear in mind, this is nothing tied to biopharma or medical or healthcare at all. This is just like a free for all, like people investing there, like bringing up their business ideas. And it is so rewarding to see that it is not just AI, and the fact that like people want to kind of couple it with deep tech, and it's open, it's much more federated. So the more and more it gets federated, the more and more we are going to benefit. And it might be like a disease that you and I might not be familiar, but somebody is suffering and they're going to get benefited.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to spin it, Arun, is it's hard to pick out a specific disease that's going to benefit, but I think all areas of medicine will probably benefit. But perhaps the biggest benefit area will be, like orphan diseases that, might not be able to get a lot of research dollars. Now, assuming enough data comes together, might be amenable to some of these approaches. The other would be, I think, things that are maybe not wide afflictions in the US, but in other parts of the developing world, things like tuberculosis and so on. It'd be wonderful if we could solve those problems because they impact so many millions more people, around the globe. And I hate to use the word, but democratization of the tools, and making it available to more applications will certainly help all of those populations.
Well, I think that's one of the promises of technology, right? Being able to take that quality of care that we get to enjoy, and figuring out how do we get that not just to other people in the United States, but globally. All right, last question. Do you think that the adoption of AI in drug discovery is limited by computational capabilities? Is quantum computing necessary to see the broad use in drug discovery? And I'd like your thoughts on this, both from an advanced therapeutic cell and gene therapy, but also to a small molecule and protein. I think all of those are different modalities that I'd love to your thoughts on. And we have 1 minute.
Who's going?
You take it, Amit.
I'll just take a quick 30-second, and I know we are almost up there. I see a lot of potential. It is very early, Claire, on the quantum computing side, but it definitely shows promises. And if you look at small molecule antibodies and up till advanced therapies, particularly cell and gene, which is our advanced industry, huge possibility. But it is evolving at a certain pace, something to watch out for. I have a firm belief. George.
All right, well, it is now 1 o'clock. I want to thank our panelists for joining us today and for being so engaging and answering the questions so well. We will follow up with folks that didn't get their questions asked. And again, thank you for joining us, and let us know what we can do to help.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.